The beliefs and the methodology of only one of these three broad groups is still alive and healthy. The rest of them, they went up and they went down and they were buried. Janazah was prayed over them. Why? Because even the Muslim masses were able to see through the ridiculousness, see through the contradictions in the methodology of both the philosophers and the Mu'tazilites. Now, getting back to our topic here, what has this got to do with women's rights in Islam? The point I'm trying to stress here is that the stakes have changed, but the game is the same. The tokens have been modified, but the board is exactly the same. No longer do we debate about qadr. No longer do we question the meaning of Allah's attributes. These are old things. Only the advanced students in graduate school study them anymore, who are specializing in Islamic history or theology. The masses are not debating qadr. The masses are not debating the nature of God. Once upon a time they did. And in reality those were far more important topics than what they're debating now. But the masses for the most part are not debating God and the angels and the day of judgment and qadr. No. They're debating now, for example, the role of women in Islam. They're debating now the concept of humanism in Islam. They're debating now, for example, the economics of Islam, of the hudud or the punishments. And the reason that this topic all of a sudden has become so important is because other cultures have changed their perceptions and their perspectives on these issues. The Muslims for 1400 years have had a steady theology and a steady fiqh. In the sense that our usul is the same. The minor issues of fiqh, they might change from culture to culture, but overall fiqh and usul are immutable. The more minor issues they can change. But for example, the 5 prayers or the hijab or something as you know, entrenched in our religion as it is, it's not going to change from time to culture. The concept will not change. Perhaps the finer details will. So for 1400 years we've had the same fiqh and theology. Why is it that for the last 100 years only, the Muslim ummah is interested in these topics? 200, 300, 500, 1,000 years ago, you never found any Muslim writing a book called In Defense of Women's Rights in Islam. Okay, Muslim women speak out, behind the veil. You never found these books in the marketplace. Why? As we said, this is a counter-reaction. This is a counter-reaction to events that are taking place outside of our religion, outside of our culture. You see, for over 1,200 years, Muslim women had it much better than their Western counterparts in terms of rights. Much better. In terms of marriage and divorce, in terms of money, in terms of transactions, in terms of freedom. A lot of things the Muslim women had it, which their Western counterparts did not have. And you all know, this is the stereotypical, things that all of you know. You all know women over here were not, the properties of their husbands completely. And in the past they were even inherited, like people inherited money. They didn't have the rights to control property. Even as recent as 18-something, 50 or something, women could not technically own land in certain European countries. Now obviously the Muslim Ummah from day one gave them this rights. So for 1,200 years, there was no room for the West to criticize Islam. Their women were behind what the Muslim women were. During the last century and a half, as you all know, Western women have changed their modus operandi, their way that they interact with society, with men, with each other. And slowly but surely they began getting more and more rights and privileges, and they began asking for more and more of these things that were previously only to men, many of which were Islamic to them from before, but Western women did not know that obviously, until finally not only did they catch up, quote unquote, with men, but they wanted to go beyond this as well. They wanted to go beyond this as well. And when they went beyond this, I will not call it progression. I don't consider this progression. I call it degeneration. But when they went beyond it, that gave them the luxury, for the first time in the history of mankind, to look down at their Muslim women counterparts. For 1,200 years, they didn't have that luxury. That possibility could not exist because Muslim women had more rights than them. In the last 100, 150 years, as we said, and especially in the last few decades, they have not progressed but degenerated to a level where they think, where they feel superior now. And they say, look at you guys, look at how you keep your women in chadars and in houses, and you do this and that, and and all of these stereotypical accusations they give against Islam. So as a response to this phenomenon, for the first time in the history of the ummah, we have to defend something we never were questioned about. We have to defend how we treat our women. We have to defend the rights that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the Messenger have commanded and given our women. With this prelude to why we're talking about the topic, let me now lead into yet another discussion before I give my own response. And let me ask, why do I believe and why do I state that the traditional stereotypical response will not work? Somebody comes and says, why do women have to wear hijab? Oh, we want women to be appreciated for their inner beauty, not their outer beauty. Okay? This is a correct, as I'll get, this is correct in and of itself, but it's also incorrect, as I'll discuss right now. Why is it a mistake to rely upon these stereotypical responses? I say that such a philosophy, such a methodology is defeatist, is apologetic, is basically having to appease to another culture and group, and you will never win them in this battle. And I say this for a number of reasons. Let me just quote 4 or 5 of them. The first reason, when people come and attack us about how we treat women, when people come and attack us about what women have to and don't have to do in Islam, and we start talking to them about the role of women in Islam, right then and there, we have fallen into a mistake. What mistake is this? The mistake is that we have lost and we have forgotten our job of preaching the religion of Islam. And we get involved in the secondary and tertiary issues of Islam. The religion of Islam is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. It is Tawheed. It is the concept of Risala, the concept of Nubuwwah, the concept of Akhirah, the concept of these 3, the pillars, the Tawheed, Risala and Akhirah. This is the religion of Islam. Da'wah is given primarily to these factors. Nobody is going to convert to Islam when he realizes that the inheritance of women is half that of men because of these factors. Nobody. And if you find the odd exception, he's the exception that proves the rule. On the other hand, millions, if not billions of people will convert to Islam when they hear about the concept of Tawheed. One God, one Creator, worship Him alone. How much more simple do you want it to be? One all-perfect being. Why go through anyone else? This is what we have been commanded to do in the Quran and the Sunnah. Call to the fundamentals of faith. Call to our theology. So by getting sidetracked into the economic system of Islam, the role of women in Islam, this and that of Islam, we are actually losing our priorities. We are forgetting our priorities, and that is calling them to the worship of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And let me speak personally as well. Many, many years ago, more than I'd like to mention here, when I was a teenager, I was giving da'wah to a friend of mine in college. Very intelligent, older than me, very intelligent person. And back then, I was still following the stereotypical response system. And so he brought up the same issue as well. Why do your women have to cover? Why can't they go and dress like you guys dress? And we were going to school together for like over 2-3 months. We were carpooling together. And so I had the entire, conversation to myself for days and days and days. And I used it in the tradition, in the stereotypical manner. I gave all of these responses. And he brought up the issue of polygamy, the issue of this, the issue of that. And I kept on responding in this traditional stereotypical response. In the end of that 3-month semester that we had, you know what? His name was Mike. Mike agreed with me. And at the end of those 3 months he said, I wish all women would wear hijab. I wish all women would act modestly with men. I wish. And he agreed with what I was telling him. But you know what? He never became a Muslim. He never became a Muslim. Because he thought, that's cool, but, so what? Good luck, I didn't approach him. I believe I fell short. I did not approach him with what was far more important than the economic system or the length of the beard or the women's hijab. These are important issues in their own fields. But what is more important is La ilaha illallah Muhammadur Rasulullah. And I feel now in retrospect that had I been talking to him about this fundamental for 3 months, he would have actually accepted Islam. Because he was open-minded and he was searching for the truth. But I concentrated my entire 3-month opportunity on the role of women in Islam. And I convinced him of that particular role, but not of Islam. Not of Islam.